So today we talked about in writing on Zoom how to zoom in on a small moment in our realistic fiction writing. So we're writing a story that is made up but could be true. And we need to focus on not just a day or a week in our story, but we need to focus on one event that happened in a day for our story. And that's called a seed idea. So we talked about how we have watermelon ideas, which are those in the list going down: playing in a soccer game, the time you swallowed a tooth, a camping trip, the day a little brother or sister was born, or Christmas Day or another holiday that you celebrate. But a seed idea for each of those different writing activities might be this: scoring the winning goal for my team would be a seed idea instead of a watermelon idea. We wouldn't want to write about the whole soccer game. We would want to write about one event that happened during the soccer game for our seed idea. Another seed idea would be what happened right before, during, and after you swallowed a tooth, or trying to go to sleep after telling spooky stories on a camping trip instead of just writing about the whole trip. So, for example, I might write about me laying in the sleeping bed, or in the sleeping bag, and trying to go to sleep, but I couldn't, and I was shaking and I was shivering, and all I could hear were all the sounds of the animals outside my tent. And I was nervous because we had just told spooky stories, and I couldn't get them out of my head, and I was trying to count sheep, and I got up to get a drink of water, and I accidentally kicked my sister. But remember, these are made up stories, not stories that are true about your life, but stories that could be real about a made up character, a fake character that you have created. And there's a couple more ideas on the page. The first time you held your newborn brother or sister could be a seed idea instead of writing about the whole day when they were born. Or eating a special meal with a family on Christmas Day or another holiday instead of writing about the entire holiday. So we focused on how to write a seed idea, and here are some suggestions on how to do that. Zoom in. Write with lots of details. In order to write with lots of details, you have to write with your 5 senses. So you're going to write a lot of describing words in your story. What do you see in your story or your character that you create? So you're pretending to be the character. What do you hear in your story? For example, you might write a sentence that said, the tiny bluebird chirped, chirp, 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 as he opened his mouth as wide as he could so that Mama Bird could drop a little food in his mouth. I could feel the wind blowing and whistling across the road. Something like that, because it's describing what you are, as the character in the story, are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, possibly if you're in a kitchen or eating dinner in your story, or feeling. So make sure you use adjectives all throughout your story. Another way to zoom in is to include exact actions. That means you're going to specifically describe what the character is doing throughout the story. So instead of just saying, my brother ran across the field, you might say, my brother, I'm trying to think of a good word, my brother leapt quickly across the wet, dewy grass early in the morning. It was 9:00 a.m. and we were finally at our soccer game. Something like that, because you're describing so that the reader, me in this case, can really make a picture in my mind of what your story is showing me and telling me without just being a summary of your story. You make me feel like I'm there because of all your describing words. And another way to do that is to use dialogue. Make those characters talk to each other. For example, if you have a teenager and a baby in your story, the baby might say, wah, 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 and the teenager might say, hey, little brother, what you want? And shakes a rattle to try to get them to stop crying. So the teenager is responding to what the baby says in the story. That's dialogue. So here's Miss Gregory's example of a story that I kind of made up. So it's about an event with a stinky dog that could totally be true. I'm going to have to make it fit the screen a little bit. It's called Annie Needs a Bath. So this paragraph that you see on the screen is what I would have written on paragraph 1, which would be page 1. So 1 page per paragraph. You need to write more than just 1 page. So you should be writing across pages. I should see in your writing probably for a story at least 4 pages, because the first page is the introduction, which is this is my example. The second and third page would be the middle parts of the story, perhaps where the problem happens, and then the last page would be your conclusion or your end of your story and how everything gets solved at the end. The problem gets solved. So remember, for introductions, you want to start with dialogue, actions, sound words, or a question that's talking to the reader a little bit. Because this is realistic fiction, it's made up. So you're making up some characters, you're making up a setting, but it's something that could happen in real life. Shoo! What is that smell? My brother yelled when Annie and I walked in the door. I noticed Annie putting back her scruffy ears. I couldn't tell if it was the loud, obnoxious rock and roll coming from Bo's room or the fact that Bo said she was stinky and she knew she was going to need what every dog hates, a bath. That would be my very first page. That's my introduction to my story. I don't have a dog named Annie. I never have had a dog named Annie. I don't have a brother named Bo. In fact, in this story, Bo is 14, which you'll find out in a minute, and the little girl, the main character in the story, we don't know her name yet, is 11. And my brother and I were way farther apart than that in age, so I made up some details, and that's what you should do. But the details that you create as a writer should be things that could be real for some families or some people. And you can base your story off of something that has really happened in your life. So my story is based off of my dog that lived a long time ago named Belle. She was a Chihuahua Dachshund mix who liked to roll around in dead things out in the yard. So like if a mouse had died and she found the scent where it had died, she would roll around in it. And it was absolutely disgusting, and I had to bathe her. So I based it off of something that I've experienced as a person and as a writer, but the story itself is made up. So I hope that helps you think of an idea that you could write about. It could be anything. It could be washing the dishes. It could be playing a video game. It could be a trip or a vacation or a holiday that you celebrate. But take that real true story and make up some details about it. Maybe you create a character that really wasn't there. Or maybe you have an event that happens that could really happen but actually didn't in your own real life. Like maybe a glass broke in the middle of a special meal with your family and your little brother had to help clean it up and he was crying. But maybe that didn't really happen. But could that happen? Absolutely. So think of things that are realistic. So that's my first introduction. Moving on to the second part of my story, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. This would be the second page of my story. Remember, I need dialogue throughout the story. So here we go. This little chicken nugget rolled around in something dead again. I frowned. I trotted to the bathroom after I tossed Annie's stinky leash out the door so I could scrub it later, wishing it wasn't my job to bathe her. When we first picked up Annie from the shelter, Bo and I had a fight over who would get to bathe her and who got to feed her. But he's 14 and I'm 11, so he wins every stinking time. That would be my second page story, kind of leading up to Annie getting a bath because that's the main part of the story. Here's the third page. Come on, stinky girl, I smiled at Annie. That tells the reader that Annie is a loved dog because her owner, the little girl, wouldn't be smiling at her and talking sweetly to her, even though she's mad, if she didn't really love her. So I didn't say that the main character loved her dog, but we can tell. Okay? She whimpered and nervously wagged her tail. Annie hates bath time because it takes away all her fun toy time. And that's where I ended. My story's not done, and yours may not be either, but that's okay. I want you to finish writing your story. today if you haven't finished it, and then follow the lesson plan. It'll tell you to go back to the story you've already written, and there's some grammar activities for you to do this week to make your story stronger and better and more interesting to read. So that's your goal today, is to work on finishing your writing first and then going back and following the lesson plan for this week to help you with the grammar standards like nouns, adjectives, and adverbs to make your writing stronger. I will see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock on Zoom.